The moment a nurse tapes that isolation sign on your door, the entire hospital starts treating you like a different category of human, and most patients never learn what that actually means. They see the sign, they feel the shift in how staff act around them, but nobody explains what's really happening behind that door. So here's what hospitals don't tell you about isolation. 1. Why the sign goes up. Let's start with what that sign actually means. Hospitals don't just throw up isolation signs randomly. There are 3 categories, and which one you're under changes everything about your stay. Contact precautions, the most common. You've got something that spreads through touch. C. diff, MRSA, certain wound infections. The bacteria lives on surfaces for days. The bed rail, the call button, the TV remote. Everything in your room is now considered contaminated. Droplet precautions, the flu, COVID, meningitis. Things that travel through the air when you cough or sneeze, but only within about 6 feet. Everyone who walks in needs a mask, but the air itself isn't trapped. Wait, let me correct that. The air isn't held in the room like it is for the 3rd category. And that 3rd category is where it gets serious. Airborne precautions, tuberculosis, measles, chickenpox. These particles hang in the air for hours. This is the isolation most people picture but few understand. And it comes with a feature most patients never see coming. 2. Negative pressure. Here's something most people don't know. In an airborne isolation room, the air is literally engineered to protect the rest of the hospital from you. The room runs on negative pressure. The ventilation system pulls air in from the hallway through gaps under the door, then exhausts it directly outside through HEPA filters. When you open that door, air flows into the room, never out. You can feel it if you stand at the threshold, that slight suction pulling the door shut. But here's the terrifying part. If that pressure system fails, if a door is left open too long, or if the filters are compromised, the entire corridor becomes contaminated. It happens more often than hospitals admit. Maintenance alerts, forgotten door seals, emergency equipment being wheeled through. These are the cracks in the system that staff manage quietly, while patients have no idea. Here's the part families don't hear. Isolation can delay every scan and procedure in your stay. An MRI that should take 30 minutes now takes 2 hours because every surface has to be wiped down afterwards. Your surgery might be postponed to the end of the day, so the OR can be deep cleaned afterward. Staff might avoid unnecessary visits altogether, meaning you're checked on less, not more. 3. The gowning ritual staff hate else. If you've ever watched a nurse suit up to enter your room, you've seen a ritual that takes minutes. The gown, the gloves, the mask if it's droplet or airborne, the shoe covers in some units. Each piece has a specific order. Gown first, then mask, then gloves over the gown cuffs. What you don't see is the controlled chaos. In a busy isolation unit, nurses are doing this 20-30 times a shift. Each time takes 2 to 3 minutes. That adds up to over an hour of a nurse's day spent just putting on and taking off protective equipment. And here's the reality. When there's a code blue in an isolation room, staff don't follow the ritual. They go in without full PPE because seconds matter more than protocol. They accept the exposure risk because a life is on the line. But the corners cut during routine care are quieter. A hurried staff member might not change gloves between touching something contaminated and touching something clean. The gown that's a bit too small leaves wrist skin exposed. These are the realities of isolation care that nobody tells patients about. 4. What leaves the room versus what never does. Once something enters an isolation room, getting it out is a whole process. Your food tray, the disposable one that comes in wrapped in plastic, gets double bagged at the door and goes straight to incineration. Your charts, those stay outside the room. Staff write on paper in the hallway, or use a tablet that stays in the room and gets wiped down with bleach wipes every single time. Here's something most people don't know: your phone. If you're in isolation, your phone is now a biohazard. Staff won't touch it. If it drops on the floor, it stays there until you can pick it up, or until someone in full PPE retrieves it. Visitors who bring you a phone to use, that device may need to stay in the room for the duration of your stay, or get cleaned with hospital-grade disinfectant that can damage the screen. The psychological effect is real. Everything in that room becomes your world. The TV remote, the call bell, the water jug, all yours. but all contaminated in everyone else's eyes.
5. Visitor rules that feel like punishment.
This is the beat families find hardest. In contact or airborne isolation, visitor rules change drastically. In some cases, visitors are limited to one person per day. In others, no one under 12 is allowed. Some hospitals require visitors to wear full PPE and only stay for 15 minutes. And here's what feels cruel. If you're in isolation for something like C. diff, your family member might be told they can hug you, but then must immediately dispose of their gown and wash with soap and water, not hand sanitizer, because C. diff spores survive alcohol. Here's the reality. Some families choose not to visit at all. The PPE feels intimidating. The time limit feels insulting. The rules feel like punishment, even though they're designed to protect everyone. And the patient? They watch their family suit up at the door like they're entering a hazard zone. That visual alone, your own mother putting on a yellow gown and gloves before she can hold your hand, that stays with you.
6. How isolation changes how often you're checked.
Here's a contradiction most patients don't expect. You'd think isolation means more attention, more monitoring, more care. In practice, it often means the opposite. Staff cluster their tasks. Instead of coming in 5 separate times, they try to do blood draws, vitals, medication, and assessment all in one trip. This sounds efficient, until something changes between visits and nobody notices for hours. The call bell takes longer to get answered because the nurse has to suit up first. Your food gets cold because it arrives at the door. Then the nurse needs a few minutes to gown up before bringing it in. This is the nightmare scenario. You're in isolation. Your condition is declining. But because every entry requires full PPE and every exit means decontamination, the response time naturally stretches. Staff are aware of it. They compensate the best they can. But isolation rooms, by design, create distance between patient and caregiver. And distance in a hospital is never good.
7. De-isolation and discharge criteria nobody explains.
You've had the illness. You've been on treatment. Now comes the question nobody answers clearly. When can the sign come down? For some conditions, it's time-based. C. diff requires 48 hours without diarrhea after antibiotics end. For TB, it requires 3 consecutive negative sputum cultures, meaning you're coughing up samples every morning for testing. For MRSA, you might need negative swabs from your nose, armpits, and groin before you're cleared. But here's what hospitals don't tell you. Even after the isolation sign comes down, your room still gets terminal cleaning. Everything that touched you, the bed, the curtains, the blood pressure cuff, gets replaced or sanitized. The room is out of commission for hours. You might be moved to a new room, disoriented, surrounded by unfamiliar equipment, just as you're starting to feel safe in the isolation room you'd grown used to. And there's no debrief. No one sits you down and says, "You were in isolation for X days. Here's what that meant for your care. Here's what to watch for now." You just leave or get moved, and the isolation experience becomes another unexamined part of your hospital stay.
The larger truth.
So here's what's dark about hospital isolation. The sign on the door is supposed to protect everyone, and it does, mostly. But it also isolates in ways that go beyond infection control. The reduced contact, the delayed responses, the psychological toll of being treated as a contamination source, these are real consequences that hospitals manage but never explain. What you don't see is the controlled chaos. The nurse who's gowning up for the 15th time that shift, the environmental services worker who spends an extra 45 minutes on your room's terminal clean, the charge nurse who's deciding whether to keep the isolation bed open or convert it for a non-isolation patient who needs monitoring. These are invisible calculations happening around you every moment of your stay. If you're learning what really happens behind hospital walls, hit subscribe. We're exposing the protocols and procedures that healthcare workers live by, and that patients deserve to understand. Next time you're in a hospital and you see that isolation sign on a door, you'll know that behind it, there's a world of invisible engineering, careful protocol, and quiet sacrifice. And it's happening to protect you, even when it doesn't feel like it.